For a second lesson this morning, words from Paul to his friends in Rome. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now, and not only the whole creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for the redemption of our bodies. For by hope we are saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not yet see, we wait for it with patience. Let us bow. O God, lift from us the trivia, the scattered thoughts, yes, the deep concerns that have cluttered our minds and days, that we may be available to that rest and refreshment which is renewal and life. In the Spirit of Jesus, amen. If I were to ask you to lift 3 or 4 of the major concerns that dominate your life right now, I would venture that the odds are very good that health would be right up near the top. Your own or that of somebody you love. If you have your health, you have everything, said somebody to me the other day for the I don't know how many thousandth time. That's what Washington is talking about, isn't it? The administration, the talk shows, Congress, news magazines, health, the health care system upon which we spend almost 1 out of every 6 of our dollars. I think Dr. Koop, by the way, said the wisest thing about all that the other day. He said Americans want 1, inexpensive health care, 2, immediate health care, 3, high-tech health care, and the problem is you can only have any two of the 3. Behind this controversy, of course, there are the health newsletters, the vitamins, the exercise cassettes, and clubs, the diets. Did you notice that following New Year's Day, the diet plans all pumped up their advertising on television, hoping to cash in on our New Year's resolutions? And now the television ads are fading away and we're still not. I've never known so many vegetarians. I even have a passel of them in the high school group now. And it's not just to save the health of the animals, you know, that they're vegetarian. Although one said the other day, I'm not a vegetarian because I love animals, I'm a vegetarian because I hate plants. New York Times publishes a health magazine at least twice a year. On Sundays, whole industries have developed to cater to our desire for eternal youth and vitality. I suspect there's no nation on earth that is as health conscious as we are. Donald Henningham took up jogging, he says, as an activity that would lower his blood pressure and induce a sense of well-being. Best of all, he writes, it'd be a way out of my obsession with collecting sports junk. There's no physical activity that requires less equipment than running. Just get up and try it. I mean, not literally, but you'll see what I mean, he writes. Running is the ultimate no-equipment activity. Oh, maybe you need a good pair of running shoes, New Balance, $100, shorts and t-shirt. Nothing to do then but go out there and do it. Well, nothing except maybe buy one of these new polypropylene running suits and maybe a digital stopwatch with a pulse reading capability and a few headbands and a polysorbate wristband with a zipper pocket for the house keys and a combination AM/FM cassette player. And yes, I suppose a battery tester and charger for all of these devices, and orthotic devices to keep your feet from pronating, and a polyunsaturated cap and gloves, a pedometer. Never mind, I'm in the American mainstream, I jog. Now, I don't want to make light of our concern for health. In fact, I just want to suggest this morning that there's another dimension of life beyond medicine and exercise and pills and diets. Another dimension of life that also has a measurable impact on whether we live healthy lives, and that is the dimension of the spirit. Biblical people may not have known about blood pressure and bugs, at least not by that name, but that doesn't mean they were devoid of curiosity about what made for health. Indeed, the recurring question in the Bible, what must I do to be saved, very often means, what must I do to be made whole? And the word for health and salvation are very often the same thing in the Greek. And Jesus was above all else a healer. Read the stories from beginning to end. He's raising people to new levels of life. Read the story we chose for our Story Sunday this day. And it is interesting that a medical profession that in past generations was appropriately devoted to hard science, thank God, tended nevertheless to be skeptical, therefore, about anything that could not be explained in terms of body chemistry. And now we are hearing from a variety of quarters about the role of mood and attitude in helping us become and stay well, the role of emotions in shaping physical well-being. There is a growing body of hard research which is beginning to explain how it is that our attitudes, our faith or doubt, our hope or despair, our love or hostility impact in major ways on our immune systems, increasing or decreasing our availability to disease. Now, this is not to reduce religion to chemistry, but after all, if we believe that our entire being is a creation of God, then it ought not to surprise us that He has created us so that we have some measure of control over our health and well-being by way of faith and hope and love. And it ought to send us back to the old stories with a new respect for what they have to say. They say there is a dimension of your health that the government will never be able to take care of via program. There is a spiritual dimension to our quest for physical and emotional and mental well-being that we must take responsibility for. The story we've chosen for this day could hardly be a better one. A man who has lived paralyzed by the poolside for years and years undergoes an encounter with a stranger that sets him back on his feet again, sets him back to life again. So what's his problem? Well, it says he's paralyzed. He can't walk, he can't move. But there's all kinds of paralysis, isn't there? There's paralysis of the mind and emotions as well as of the body. I encountered somebody the other day who said to me, I just can't seem to move. And I never would have said to him, that's funny, you look pretty good to me, your arms and legs seem to be doing all right, because I knew exactly what he meant. He meant he couldn't get going. He was so down, he was immobilized. Paralysis. A young person said to me not long ago, usually it's parents, but this time it was a young person, I know I have to get my applications in for college, but I just can't seem to get down to it. And I understand that. I remember it well. Paralysis. Now, is there anything in our story to tell us what kind of paralysis we're dealing with? Is he a full-fledged clinical paraplegic, spinal nerve severed? Or is there something else going on here quite different but equally serious? I think so, and I think the question Jesus asks him is the tip-off. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he'd been there for a long time, he asked him just about the dumbest question I've ever heard. Do you want to be made well? Now you have to know that that pool was magic. Every once in a while, the water in it would begin to bubble and froth like a giant jacuzzi, and rumor had it that the first one in after that happened would be healed. So this guy's laying there for 38 years just waiting for his chance. But so far, every time it's happened, somebody else has beat him to it. And you can imagine his reaction to Jesus' question. What do you mean, do I want to be well? What do you think I've been doing here all these years? That's a stupid and rather mean thing to say. And it is, unless Jesus is on to something. Maybe a good part of this fellow's problem is precisely the fact that he has now spent most of his life lying there waiting for some magic to happen. Maybe the problem is more in his head than in his legs. Not denying the possibility of miracles, nor the existence of purely physical problems. But don't forget that many of our so-called physical ailments have a strong emotional and attitudinal component, including some of the worst killers in society today. A lot of physical problems originate in our head. But I keep thinking about that question of Jesus. Why would anybody want to stay sick? Well, if you think about it, that's not a hard question to answer. You remember when you were a little kid and you woke up in the morning and you remembered you had a big test that day and you really hadn't studied for it, and you really didn't feel like going to school, and you said to your mother, "Mom, I think I should stay home today. I'm not feeling very well." And if you're sick, you get a whole lot more attention and a lot less demand. And people worry about you and scurry around trying to be helpful, especially mothers. Being a victim has tremendous compensations. A victim of disease or illness, or dare I add, discrimination or underprivilege or overprivilege or child abuse or drug abuse. It's really all over the place today, isn't it? We refine victimology to a fine heart. And I don't make light of any of these things, but there are tremendous rewards to deciding that you're a victim, period. The victim does not have to take responsibility for what he does. He receives all the clinical understanding the psychological professions can muster and all the empathy the juries can manage. And he has tremendous leverage in getting what he wants from parents, spouse, peers, community, even Congress. Maybe he's unwilling or unable to move because he's discovered how good it is to be a victim. He lived there, I suspect. You could do that in those days, and I've seen the pool. We dug it up, just in the last 20 years. Everybody said there's never been a Greco-Roman pool with 5 porches, but we dug it up, and there it was with 5 porches. And 2 pools, no less. And a lovely Greco-Roman colonnade to shade you from the sun is really not a bad place to hang out. The equal of any country club pool I've seen in the neighborhood. And then there's the company. Same familiar, friendly faces for all that time. Old buddies by now after 38 years. People just like him, who understand him, with whom he's comfortable and at home. Be hard to leave, really. Would miss them terribly. Hard for some of the kids I see living across from White's drugstore to walk away from the lifestyle I observe there. I mean, it's nice to have friends. Be kind of lonely at first, and where else do you hang out? And then there's latent in the story the possibility that he's a victim of a kind of false hope. Not all hope is good, Certainly not the hope that if you hang around long enough, something will turn up. After all, your luck is bound to change if you're patient. Someday they will all slow down, they'll get older, and you'll get in the water ahead of them. I see a lot of this. Young people hanging around parents and home, waiting for something to kind of fall in their lap. Middle-aged types, waiting for life to turn better, waiting for someone else to come along, waiting for the kids to leave home, waiting for a change at the top. Heard of a little guy the other day who said, "I wish my dad could spend more time with me, but I guess he can't. Mom says it's because he's in the Middle Ages." Retirees hanging around the poker table at the club, waiting, it looks like, for something to happen. I was talking to the manager of a resort in Greece last year. We were discussing the economy over there, which is bad. I asked him what the problem was. His answer caught me completely off guard. He said, "Our people would rather hope than work." After a bit of puzzlement, I realized what he was driving at. Rather than take their lives in their own hands and try to do something about the situation, they were content to wait for another government to come along. Maybe Papandreou would fix things. And it all smells like paralysis to me. It all smells like learned hopelessness. And after all, any rut has its rewards, doesn't it? But thank God the story doesn't end there. He encounters a stranger who refuses to hear his excuse. Did you notice that? Who demands of him his confidence. And here is where health, the freedom to be all that we can be, do all we can do, always begins. With confidence in the word of a greater who comes to us and says, "No, not magic. Stand up, take your mat, walk. Not magic, you." You see, for the writer of John, the presence of Jesus is the presence of divine. And I find it interesting what he does for people. He never rescues them. He empowers them. John pictures God at work in our world, but never independent of us and our faith. It's when we begin to trust Him and His Word, trust that life can be bigger and better than it is, trust that we don't have to wallow in our misery and failure. We don't have to sit there immobilized and miserable. We really don't. When we begin to believe that word of Jesus, change starts, real health begins. Scientist Edward Stein writes about passing through a period of severe turmoil and depression in his life, and out beyond it, he intimates how he did it. Who is the mysterious spirit that heals us, that binds us up, that rebuilds us, rebuilds broken families, that evokes tenderness and forgiveness of ourselves and hope in us again? Who is that mysterious spirit that conceived the delicate wonder of childhood, the sensuous warmth of mature beauty, the gnarled gray wisdom of age, the endless mystery of life and death and tears and laughter? In a sense, I don't know. But I sense His presence and I feel His power now, and I've learned to trust Him. I'd only add that we Christians meet Him most powerfully in that figure of a stranger by the Bethesda pool. So health begins with trust, with confidence that is hope for better in life than long hours, day by day, lying at the side of a pool. The trust that there's more to life than that. Again, can you imagine the scene? This helpless soul, this soul who's convinced that he's helpless, is challenged after 38 years of inactivity and waiting and passivity, is challenged to get up. Can you imagine the panic? So this trust and hope that Jesus calls us to is never a passive thing. It never leaves us resting where we are. It always calls for risk, for movement, for action. Jesus is always saying, get up, get going. I find one of the fascinating things about the faith that Jesus demands is this: it mobilizes. Trust in God gives us more, not less, control over our lives. You ask this God to take charge of your life, and He frees it from fear of your peers and paralysis of your pessimism and resignation before your hard luck, frees it from all these, and hands it back to you. In a recent survey of 1,473 people, Purdue sociologist Kenneth Ferraro found that practice of one's faith enhances one's health. But he also discovered that neither creed nor feelings do it. It is acting out one's faith that does it. My favorite example of the power of faith to give you charge over your life is the story of Wilma Rudolph. She was born prematurely in a small Tennessee town with complications that led to pneumonia twice and to scarlet fever. A bout with polio left her left leg crooked and her foot twisted inward. She remembers to this day 6 years of trips weekly to Nashville for treatment. She'd ask the doctor every time if she could take her braces off, and he would always say, "No, Wilma, no, you can't." But by the time she was 11, she got the crazy belief that she could indeed take her braces off, and when her parents were not home, she did just that, and she would walk painfully around the house with a brother who acted as lookout. Guilt at her disobedience began to gnaw at her, so one day, she says, on a visit to Nashville, she decided Judgment Day had come. "I have something I'd like to show you," she said to the doctor, and she proceeded to take the braces off and walk across the office to where he was sitting. "How long have you been doing this?" the doctor asked, trying to control his emotions. Wilma never put the braces on again. At age 12, she decided she'd try out for the girls' basketball team. She was crushed to learn that she did not make the team, but her sister did. When the coach came to the house to explain the practices and the road trip schedule to her parents, her father agreed with one stipulation. "My girls," he said, "always travel in twos, and if you want Yvonne, you'll have to take Wilma along as chaperone." Wilma soon learned that being placed on the team because of your father did not win you a lot of friends. So one day she got up nerve enough to confront her coach, and she blurted out, "If you'll give me 10 minutes of your time every day, I will give you in return a world-class athlete." The very words she used, and after he quit laughing uncontrollably and picked himself up off the floor, he agreed. Next year, Wilma and her sister both made the team. What she didn't know was that someone was watching her that season. Ed Temple, internationally known track coach of the prestigious Tiger Bells of Tennessee State, was referee at every high school game she played. And he suggested to her one day that after basketball she'd try track, and soon she found that with her determination she could run faster than anyone in her high school. So at 14 she joined the Tennessee State track team, and by the end of the summer she'd won the 75 and 100-yard dash and was on the winning 440 relay team in the national AAU meet. Mae Faggs, a young woman on campus, took Wilma in tow, listened to her crazy dreams, and talked her into trying out for the Olympics. So she ran in the 1956 Games in Melbourne, Australia, winning a bronze medal as a member of the relay team, and came home crushed. A 16-year-old determined to get it right. She resorted to the kind of extracurricular do-it-yourself program she'd used learning to walk without her braces. She would run late at night and at 6 in the morning, at 10 in the morning, and at 3 in the afternoon, and she kept this up for 1,200 days by her own exact count. So in Rome in 1960, to the shouts of "Wilma, Wilma" from all the crowds, she became the first woman in history to win 3 gold medals in track and field, and each in world record time. And then she spent the rest of her middle years speaking to church groups, urging young people to have faith in God and the gifts He had given them, and never to tire of pursuing their highest and best. And she told them what lay behind her determination. She spoke of a strong Christian home and a mother who would say to her over and over again, "Honey, the most important thing in life is to believe and to keep on trying." Faith is the power that enables us to take up our life and walk. Does it always turn out Wilma's way? Does it always mean gold medals? Not by a long shot. And if it doesn't, it is certainly no sign of failure or cause for guilt. It did not work for my father, for example, who died almost 40 years ago at the age of 48. If he'd lived 30 years later, he probably would have been cured by the wonders of medical science. But in his day, he was a man of great faith and prayer, and in the end, if he lost the battle, he did not lose the war. Not really. His illness never paralyzed him. His faith did not save him from death, but then faith never saves us from death, does it? But it did save him from bitterness and complaint and despair, and it kept him hoping right to the end, kept him alive longer than the average case, and with a quality of spirit that everybody in the community admired. And then, too, there was the night when all his pain went away, pain from a swollen spleen which remained swollen, pain which never returned. Why? I think his faith, and the faith of others who gathered round to support. Prove it? Of course not. For faith, in the last analysis, always remains just that, faith. And no matter what happens, I'm convinced that the man or woman of faith and hope always wins. Wins life that the skeptic, the gloomy, the despairing never know, no matter how long their days. So why not go for it? No matter what is holding you down at poolside, take up your life, walk. Run.